So, welcome everyone to today's session of the Ex-Religious Sport Network. This is a joint event between the Ex-Religious Sport Network and Humanist Australia. And today's session is titled Religious Trauma, Identity and Relationships. So, this is the second of a five-part series of talks by Caroline Winzenried. The first session on 2nd of April was a general introduction to the phenomenon of religious trauma. In this session, Caroline will take a deeper dive into the complexity of navigating relationships and identity after leaving religion. Strained or severed ties with loved ones and communities can be one of the most challenging aspects of leaving, and for some people, the risk of rejection is so strong that they feel they need to stay in the closet. But it isn't just relationships with others that are affected. Leaving religion also has profound impacts on identity. So today, Caroline will discuss the profound impact of religious trauma on interpersonal relationships and the relationship with the self. So a little bit about our speaker. Caroline Winzenried is a counsellor in Boronia, Victoria, here in Australia, specialising in religious trauma. She works from an existential humanist framework, helping individuals to explore how religion has influenced their lives and supporting them in finding a path that reflects their authentic values. So please welcome Caroline.
Thanks, Les, and thank you everyone for having me here tonight. It's really good to be back, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to explore this particular part of religious trauma with you, which I think has a lot to explore. We'll be talking about relationships, both with other people, including family, friends in the community, and also the relationship with the self and identity. So, as Les said earlier, my name is Caroline Winzenried, and I am a counselor and psychotherapist based in Brownia. And a lot of the work that I do is working with people as they navigate the impact of questioning or leaving religion and exploring, in a more general sense, the impact that religion has had on them. In the last session, we took a look at some major themes in religious trauma, and that was part one of a five-part series. So today in part two, we're going to take a closer look at one of those themes that we covered, which is identity and relationships. So I'd like to start with an exploration of the interpersonal impacts of religious trauma. Leaving or questioning religion can cause strain in relationships. This is relationships with friends, family, and community, and it can also be workplaces. Friends and family may try to bring the person who leaves back into the fold, and this can have really big impacts on people. They may also try to distance themselves from that person or even become estranged. Sometimes these reactions can be overt. For example, a family member issuing ultimatums, like, if you don't come to church, it's a little premature. Let's stay on this slide. If you don't come to church with me, you won't be allowed to keep living under this roof. Other times, these reactions can be more subtle or covert. An example of this could be a friend who insists that your friendship hasn't changed, and yet they keep sending you pointed Bible verses. Religion gives people social roles to help them navigate the social world and to understand who they are in their communities. These roles often depend on your age, gender, marital status, and position within the religious institution. These roles can give people a sense of belonging in their community and provide guidance for how to contribute. Often, they can also be limiting, hierarchical, or restrictive. For example, a child in a Christian church may grow up with the roles including Sunday school student, choir singer, or youth group member. They may learn that they can contribute to their community and form bonds by singing together at a church service, in the choir, or volunteering with their youth group. When these children grow into young adults, they are given different roles. Young men and women are more likely to be segregated by gender, such as into men's or women's Bible study groups, mentorship programs, or volunteer branches. In some religions, there is also a heavy emphasis placed on finding a spouse, and single adult community members are sometimes siloed into these groups, dedicated to helping them achieve that goal. Their singleness becomes a defining part of their identity, and sometimes there is a stigma that can be attached to this. An example of this can be seen in the Mormon faith, where single young adults are often expected to join singles congregations and focus on finding a partner. On this slide, I've included just some of the many examples of social roles that people can take on in faith communities. These can include a musician, maybe playing gospel music for a church service, or playing the organ. This can include their role as a mother or father, and these are roles that extend beyond the family unit to how they're seen in the wider context of religion. They could also be a pioneer, and in the Jehovah's Witnesses, this refers to somebody who spends roughly 70 hours a month going out and spreading the word to other people, knocking on doors. They might be a youth group member, a member of the singles congregation, or a men's group. They might sing in the choir or volunteer as an usher. They could be a bishop, or maybe they're responsible for running the audio video systems. They could also be known as a church handyman or take on a patriarch role in their community. As you can see, many of these roles are based on the talents that people might bring to their community, or their family roles or subgroups that they belong to, including their demographics. Often, these roles overlap, with people taking on various different roles within their religious community. Social roles shape scripts and templates for how to exist in a community. These are the roles that help people answer questions like, how do I make friends? How do I find a romantic partner? What can I do to be valued in my community? And also, what is expected of me in my community? It also answers a big question about identity. Who am I to my friends, family, and community? These social roles are all interconnected and defined by relationships. This means that if someone leaves the religious community, they lose these roles and the scripts and templates that come with them. It can be tremendously challenging to find new roles and new ways of navigating the social world. People often struggle to find a sense of who they are, how to form new relationships, and how to find a sense of connection and belonging in the world. And because social rules are so interconnected, this can have cascading effects on family, friends, and community that can lead to relational strain. In high demand or high control religions, there is the ever-present threat that leaving the religion could mean losing your family, friends, or even your entire community. There can also even be the threat that because of you, your family will not be able to enjoy a happy afterlife. And this is particularly evident in the Mormon faith, where many believe that they can only reach the highest form of the afterlife if their family is complete, meaning that they all believe in the faith. Someone leaving the faith not only loses a sense of sacredness that may be attached to their role in the family and the way that they see that through the lens of religion, but then they also have to face this burden of feeling like they're responsible for their family and the way that they see their future. Let's look at another example of these cascading effects from a 2019 study by Lee and Gruby. One participant in this study described how the loss of his formal role of husband in the church resulted in the loss of his wife's formal role as a wife within the religion. He explained, "It basically meant the end of my marriage, because for my wife at the time, your whole status as a woman in the church is based upon who you're married to. So for her having someone who is basically being ostracized by the church, that meant she had zero status in the church. It's almost worse than having a husband who's not part of it. You have a husband who's an apostate." Many people who realize that they no longer believe in a faith are confronted with a choice: either hide their disbelief or risk damaging their relationships by being honest, and also risk this feeling that I'll be hurting the people I care about if I'm honest. Many participants in the study I mentioned chose to hide their disbelief, and they described feeling like frauds or feeling undercover. They felt a distance between themselves and their families, as if their families did not truly know them. Another participant in Lee and Gruby's study, who is a former Jehovah's Witness, described having to express his disbelief very carefully, as if he were walking on eggshells. And he did this, he said, so that he could minimize consequences for his family. This is how he described it. "When I finally said I was leaving, I tried to express myself in such a way that I was not attacking the church, because if I had done anything like that, then it would be like a formal shunning. And so I had to make a point of saying as much as I could without saying the wrong thing and getting myself disfellowshipped. If I had been disfellowshipped and it was found out that my mom still talks to me, she could actually risk being removed too." Leaving a religion often comes at a great social cost and requires sacrificing the powerful institutional support of a religious institution, and also one's former community of faith, sometimes even close friendships and family relationships too. In especially insular religious communities, admitting openly that you no longer believe in the faith can result in dramatic changes to family ties. We took a look at what that can look like in the Mormon faith, and to give a little bigger picture around that, this can also extend to no longer being allowed to attend important events, such as weddings. In religions such as the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Exclusive Brethren, and some ultra-Orthodox Judaist sects, you might be disowned or estranged from your family. In leaving, many people also struggle with the new responsibility of building social connections. Religious communities provide a built-in social network and structured socialization in which people can follow the social scripts that are given to them with their social rules. Religion also includes bonding rituals like prayer, services, regular gatherings, and religious study. In comparison, the secular world can feel free, but it can also feel quite daunting in the enormous variety of choices for social connection and the amount of personal responsibility that comes with that. It can be hard to build and to maintain relationships, particularly if there isn't kind of a one-stop for those connections. Gone are the rules and the structure of religious social scripts when you leave, and you are left to write it all for yourself. The safety net that religious institutions provide can also be challenging to rebuild. Being a member of a religious community can provide a financial safety net and several job opportunities as well that are not available to those outside of the religion. This can make leaving especially difficult for people who feel that they are just barely scraping by, and especially for people whose jobs and career paths are inherently tied to their religious community. And for example, this could be bishops, youth ministers, but also religious school staff or religious artists as well. Religious trauma doesn't just impact relationships with others, it also impacts a person's relationship to his or herself. And this is what we call the intrapersonal relationship. This can include a person's self-concept or sense of their identity, their decision-making process, and how they see themselves. As part of rewriting this intrapersonal relationship, new and important questions emerge for people as they leave or are considering leaving a religion. These can include questions like, who am I? How do I define myself in the world? What are my strengths and what are my values? What do I want to do with my life? And how do I make decisions now? People often undergo a grueling process of trying to answer these big questions, and they have really big implications for every area of a person's life, including their relationships, their careers, the way they spend their time, and important life decisions. I'd like to give you a quick example to illustrate how difficult these questions can be to answer. Let's take Sam, a fictional man that I've come up with for today, whose story was created from a composite of many different people's experiences. Sam is a single man in his mid-30s who works as an organ player, playing for church services. He's been doing this for as long as he can remember in his adult life, but he no longer believes in the Christian religion that he was raised in, and he's afraid to leave. When he thinks about what he'll do for a career now instead, he feels lost. He's been thinking about the question, what do I want to do with my life now? And trying to figure out if he still wants to play the organ at all, when it was so closely tied to his faith. And what if he can't continue his career playing the organ in a secular context? He's been thinking about that too, and asking himself, what other strengths can I draw on to find a job? It's a really tough question for Sam because he's been so used to attributing his skills and achievements to God. He isn't used to thinking about what other skills and strengths he might have, or how he might like to use them outside of his faith. He's starting to toy with the idea of picking up a completely different skill set and pursue a career in IT. But when he asks himself, how will I decide if I should take that leap? He feels stumped. He used to pray for guidance from God, but now that he doesn't believe in God or prayer anymore, he's not sure how he'll know what feels right for him. Sam also wants to find a girlfriend, but he's not sure how he'll do that yet in the secular world. He knows how to meet women at church, and he had a script of what that dating process looked like. Now he has no idea what dating will be like in the secular world, or even what kind of woman he'd like to date. When he was a Christian, he knew that he should look for a woman who was kind, devout, and modest. Now he has to ask himself, what is it that I value in a partner? He doesn't even know where to begin with that. Is modesty, for example, actually important to him? Or is that a value of the church? Constructing new identities after leaving a faith can be a long and slow process. We looked at this process through the lens of a more mainstream Christian context, but let's also take a look at what it can look like in a more isolated context. A Haredi Jewish woman in Davidman and Grill's 2007 study described sneaking out of her family's house to go to a bar and wearing pants under her skirt so that she could remove her skirt when she got there. Another participant in this study described hiding his traditional curls behind his ears whenever he went dancing at clubs. For these two young people, and many others in isolated religious communities, this transitional half in, half out stage can feel like living a double life. And especially in insular religions such as Haredi Jewish sects, Jehovah's Witnesses, and the Amish, it can be extremely challenging to take that step and fully transition to living in the secular world. Many members and former members of these religions grew up in a very enclosed community that was cut off from that part of the world. And so for them, taking that step is like learning a whole new language. It's a massive culture shock. These communities can be geographically and culturally isolated, and sometimes they only have limited exposure to the primary language of the country that they live in. Many don't even have the opportunity to get a glimpse of the outside world from movies or TV, which might be forbidden or inaccessible. Another hurdle to constructing new identities is the lack of institutional support. The process of joining a religion is typically highly structured, with the religious institution providing guidance, social support, and rituals to signify new identities, including cultural scripts for the conversion process. And this is a process that is often celebrated by the community. Leaving a religion, on the other hand, is often done in isolation and without the guidance of these cultural scripts. The participants in Davidman and Greel's study describe themselves as actors without a script, who have had to build and improvise new identities all on their own. Coming from a religion that assigned roles and identities, it can feel like a steep learning curve to navigate how to take full responsibility for creating your own identity. Just like with our example earlier of Sam, ex-evangelical Christian participants in Lee and Gooby's study describe believing that only God was responsible for their achievements and that their futures were for God to decide. These messages can be disempowering and can foster a lack of autonomy and low self-concept. This can create challenges in knowing how to think for oneself and how to take responsibility for one's life. Many who are suddenly tasked with determining their own future feel ill-equipped to do so. In the search for a new identity, people sometimes become stuck in reactive identities. In his 2017 study, Fisher explains that the extreme stress that can come with leaving a religion can provoke a defensive response. This can cause people to develop an identity that is deeply focused on rejecting a religion. And this is an important stage of the process and an exploratory stage, which can feel empowering, but it can also leave people feeling stuck and kind of anchored to the faith, even when they were hoping to leave and distance themselves from it. In the end, staying in this stage for too long can feel disempowering, as it's important, ultimately, to build a new identity that feels distinctly yours. As a counselor who works with religious trauma, I often have people ask me at the end of their first session, is it possible to overcome these hurdles? And I want to acknowledge that these are big hurdles, and sometimes they can feel insurmountable. But I want to tell you what I always tell them, which is that I know it's possible, and I know that because I've had the privilege to see that firsthand in the people that I've worked with on their journeys. Redefining the identities and social roles that you took on in religion is a tough and emotional task. But while many who leave a religion mourn the loss of these existing social roles and identities, they also describe these experiences as being the catalyst of an empowering journey to determine their own identities and futures. Stepping out of old roles and identities can create possibilities that would have never felt possible before. For some people, this can mean new career opportunities, such as a former Jehovah's Witness who's been discouraged from ever pursuing higher education, who goes on to pursue that university degree and move into a specialized job. Or maybe it can mean embracing their sexuality, accepting themselves for who they truly are, and opening the door to new relationships that feel loving and fulfilling. And while it is an enormous task to build a new identity and to create or redefine social roles, it can lead to a greater sense of authenticity and fulfillment. After leaving a religion, friendships and family relationships often undergo a transformation as these social roles are redefined. This is often a painful process, and the unfortunate reality is that sometimes these relationships deteriorate or come to an end as a result. But sometimes this process can actually lead to a deepening of relationships where both parties are able to connect on a more honest, authentic level. People describe having conversations with their families after leaving religion that they would have never thought possible before. Conversations allowing them to explore family dynamics, faith, and different perspectives. These conversations, in turn, allow for greater understanding and create room for change. I think it's also helpful to acknowledge that constructing new identities doesn't mean throwing out everything attached to those previous identities. In many cases, there may be something that we want to hold on to from those identities and take them with us, rewriting them in a new context. In Nika's 2020 study, for example, participants expressed that it was actually quite empowering to translate to the secular world the values and the skill sets that had drawn them to certain roles within their religious community. One participant expressed that she was able to translate her role in the church as a building and social coordinator into pursuing an occupation in interior design. Even participating in the same activities, such as volunteering, took on a new significance for participants in the study after they had left their religion. A former Baptist priest described finding a new sense of fulfillment from charity work and volunteering now that he felt these activities came from his own volition and not a sense of needing to score brownie points with the church. And according to the research, one of the biggest challenges of healing from this kind of social and identity flux is this feeling of being alone in that journey. As we discussed earlier, there's a real difference between converting to a religion and having that whole community-wide celebration and leaving a religion. People often feel quite isolated in that. And that's why support groups play a really important role in offering a community for people who have left or who are thinking of leaving so that they don't feel so alone. They know that this is something that other people have done, and they can compare those experiences to their own and be supported in that transition. Sharing your story with others can help them to make sense of their experiences and can also help you to make sense of your own. And in doing this collaboratively, people can together create a sense of having a template for this kind of journey and a sense of community. If you are struggling with reconstructing your identity and navigating relationships after leaving religion, You may also find it helpful to explore this with the support of a mental health practitioner, such as a counselor or a psychologist. And on this slide, I've listed a few of the studies that I've referenced during this presentation. There's a lot of really excellent research coming out lately about religious trauma, and I would certainly encourage you to take a closer look if you're curious to learn more. And that's all from me for tonight. So thank you for being here for this presentation, and I look forward to hearing your questions.